Late to call it as a good evening, but as a custom, I would say good evening. But otherwise, I welcome you all at this Thursday, 10 p.m. This is our second meeting and second leg of our discussion on taxability of transfer of tenancy. As you all are aware, CA Deepak Tikekar has led the discussion very nicely last time, and he'll be continuing the same this time also. Uh, it was inaugurated last time by uh, CA Anil Sathe. He is also present, and there are so many stalwarts in appeals. They are also present today. They are listening to the discussion. And those who have joined in for the first time, let me tell you that this is a discussion meeting and not a lecture meeting. Although whatever we had just now discussed, that what was actually discussed in the last meeting will be taken up by CA Deepak Tikekar quickly. And in case there is something which is needed to be added or asked, or some point if you think that it was not covered last time, only then you can stop him after he discusses these 3 points. And thereafter, it will actually take the discussion mode. In the discussion mode also, maybe he will first actually take up all those 10 points, and then one by one, again, he will go back and start with the discussion. So this is actually uh, a unique idea of having a discussion. See, there are so many ideas which come to the people's mind. There is no shortage of remarkable ideas. What's missing normally is the will to execute them, and that is what we are trying to do by executing this good idea. So I don't want to take much of your time because we want to
Pooja,
complete the session by 11:30 to the best extent possible. And therefore, I would request CA Deepak Tikekar to start with his lecture. One small instruction: in case you are not speaking, please mute your audio. So for video concern, you can always put it on as per your choice, but your audio should not be so that the voice quality of the speaker will be very good, and so that if you want any question, ask any question, that time you can just a minute. Let me mute the people. Okay, so now I request Sri Deepak Tikekar to take over. Thank you.
Welcome everybody to this second session. This is on again implication of transfer of tenancy rights and allied issues. I have divided the whole presentation into 10 points. So point number 1 is what is the nature of immovable property, and it includes bundle of rights. Point number 2 is what is the definition of tenancy under Maharashtra Rent Control Act, because there is no definition under Income Tax Act. Point number 3 is tax treatment in the hands of the original tenant. This I have divided into 3 parts. A, when there is a complete outright sale of tenancy. B, when there is a transfer of tenancy under redevelopment agreement. And C, after redevelopment, when you get your ownership flat, when you sell that ownership flat, what would be the cost of acquisition? These 3 points we had discussed in detail. The other points I will just narrate first, and then I'll go to point number 1 onwards. Point number 4 is treatment in the hands of the legal heirs of the tenant who are not residing with that tenant in those premises. Point number 5 is tax treatment in the hands of the person inheriting the tenancy on the death of the father. Sixth point is tax treatment in the hands of landlord. Seventh point is tax treatment in the hands of the incoming tenant. Eighth point is what are the tax implication of transfer of subtenancy. Ninth point I have just covered is because when you transfer tenancy, you get 54 exemption. There are two main conditions to be satisfied. One is that as on the date of transfer of tenancy, you should not own more than one house. And the second condition is that you should not construct another house within a period of 3 years. So there is one interesting decision I would like to share with you. And point number 10, this is not strictly pertaining to tenancy, but this is pertaining to leasehold rights and the allowability of deduction from business income in respect of leasehold rights. So I'll come back to point number 1. Point number 1, we had discussed earlier. What I had mentioned was that whenever you acquire any property, be it land or building, you acquire a bundle of rights. So in case when you acquire a land, or when you acquire a building, you acquire a number of rights like right to occupy that premises, right to give those premises on leave and license basis, right to give those premises on lease basis, and right to create a tenancy. Then I had described once that there is another recent concept called the freely transferable tenancy. So in this case, in case of freely transferable tenancy, the landlord consent is not required for transfer of tenancy, and the landlord doesn't get that whatever that 30% not of Maharashtra Rent Control Act, Section 7, subsection 15, defines tenant as any person, defines tenant as any person by whom rent is payable for any premises. So keep this definition is always in mind, that tenant means any person by whom rent is payable for any. The tenant, then the term includes in case of a residential premises, it includes any member of his family who is residing with the tenant at the time of his death. B, in case of other than residential, that is commercial premises or educational premises or so and so, any person who or any member of the family who at the time of tenant's death is using such premises for the said purpose. So then the section says, in the absence of any family member of the tenant, any heir of the tenant, as may be decided by the court, in the absence of any agreement with the tenant, will become a tenant on the death. As per Maharashtra Rent Control Act, tenancy cannot be bequeathed by will. It will pass on under, does not apply. Within these points, I had suggested all of you to refer BCA Journal of March 2020. I will quickly cover those 6 points which are mentioned there. So for the purpose of this Rent Control Act, Section 7, subsection 15, family means somebody who is connected by blood or by marriage in the family. So for example, if a daughter is born in the family, it is family. If daughter-in-law is admitted into the family after marriage, she will be part of the husband's family. In case of a non-residential premises, on death of a tenant, person in occupation of and carrying on the business and not the other legal heirs will inherit. So if a person is having business, a tenant and having a tenancy, the business is being carried out in a tenanted premises. If one of his son is carrying on business in that tenancy along with his father, that person will inherit the tenancy and not the other legal heirs or other sons or other daughters who are his members of his family. So in case of a residential tenancy, any members who are residing with the tenant at the time of his death will get the protection. For example, if there is a father and 2 sons, one son is staying with the father and another son is staying outside, then in that event, the tenancy will go to a son who is residing with the father at the time of his death, and the succession law will not apply in such event. If the tenants are staying with they are brothers, and if they are members of Hindu undivided family, then the HUF cannot claim that all the members are tenants. The tenants have to decide themselves amongst themselves and hold that one person will become the tenant and the others will be only the occupants. In the absence of family members, heirs of the tenants will become tenant. So who are those? So in case of a male tenant, his brother will certainly become the tenant if he's staying, if it is decided by the court. In case of a female tenant, her brother will not become the member of the family because he is not a member of her husband's family. So tenancies are generally governed by the governing legislation, that is Rent Control Act, and not by the succession law. However, if the Rent Control Act of any state, this is the Maharashtra, the Income Tax Act is a federal act, whereas these are state acts. So if there is the rent control law of the any state is silent about it, then only the tenancy will be governed by the succession law. However, the law in Maharashtra is very clear. Therefore, in the state of Maharashtra, tenancy will not be governed by the personal law, that is Hindu succession law, or by the will. Point number 3, I will cover. We had already covered. So point number 3, will check each and everything, all the points. So 1, when there is a sale of tenancy, and if the full value of consideration received is less than the stamp duty value, then 50C does not apply. The reason being, in section 50C, it is mentioned that it is applicable only when the asset transferred is either land or building or both, but it does not cover tenancy. So I had attached one case law 3181. I will not go through that again. Then similarly, it will the 50C will not apply to leasehold rights, booking rights, and yeah, it will not apply to leasehold rights and booking rights. Point number 2, I had said that cost of acquisition in case of tenancy is defined under section 55(2)(a)(1). So where it says that if you have paid certain amount, then it will be deemed to be cost of acquisition. Otherwise, if you have not paid any amount for acquisition of tenancy, then the cost of acquisition will be nil, except under the circumstances when the tenancy is acquired by the new tenant under section 49(1)(1) to 49(1)(4). So if you have acquired tenancy by way of a gift or by way of a succession, you should not substitute fair market, the 10 nil value. That section is not applicable. Whenever there is a transfer of tenancy, if the gain is not taxable under the head capital gain or for any other reason, it cannot be taxed under the head income from other sources. This is held in Sandhu Brothers. So many times we are getting nowadays questions whenever there is the redevelopment of the society, why this income should not be taxed under the head income from other sources. This is a strong defense that if any particular item falls under the head capital gain, if it cannot be taxed under that head for any reason, the same cannot be taxed under the head income from other sources. We will cover point number B, tenancy under redevelopment agreement. So in this case, we had discussed that the transfer, when the transfer would be complete. So here I had pointed out one decision, and we had discussed that decision, stating that if the permanent alternate accommodation agreement contains a clause that the tenancy will continue till the permanent alternate accommodation is handed over to the tenant, then the capital gain would be taxable in the year in which you get your permanent alternate accommodation. Sagar, can I request you to go to that attachment, because in 3B1 there is an attachment.
Okay, just give me some time.
Interestingly, one of our colleague, Mr. Milind Desai, yeah, specimen power, yeah. So this is a live case. One of our colleague, that is Mr. CA Milind Desai, he handed over this document to me, And Sagar, can you go to para 14 of this agreement? This is a very interesting case, and I've thought this squarely fits into this. So para 14 of this says that extinction of tenancy or occupancy right and liability of the tenant or occupant to pay outgoings in respect of permanent alternate accommodation. This clause says upon the receipt of possession of permanent alternate accommodation, the tenancy occupancy right of the tenant occupant in respect of said premises shall stand extinguished, and the tenant occupant shall become owner of the said new flat. So this was important. Sagar, can you go to point number 20? See, this is a very interesting point here, which last time CA Anil Sate had also mentioned. The tenant occupant undertakes that he shall not transfer his interest in respect of the said tenant premises after signing this agreement, and further undertakes that he shall not transfer, part with possession, or assign in any manner whatsoever his rights in respect of new flat to be allotted in lieu of the said old flat in the proposed new building before receipt of possession of the said new flat. So I also feel that if these two types of clauses are incorporated in the agreement, you have a very strongly arguable case that the tenancy right will get the capital gain will arise when you receive permanent alternate accommodation. Otherwise, if such clauses are not there in the tenant in the permanent alternate accommodation, moment you sign the permanent alternate accommodation and hand over possession of your tenanted premises to the developer, the capital gain will arise. So this I feel this looks much better drafted agreement to argue that you can postpone the taxation of capital gain.
Only Deepak, the
Yes.
only point is what you say is absolutely right, but there may be situations where this is a situation where you are not entitled to transfer either the tenancy or the right in regard to the new premises till you get possession.
Correct.
Now that is beneficial if you are looking at only the capital gains angle, because
Correct.
in that scenario the capital gains will be chargeable simultaneously, in the sense at the tenancy will get extinguished and you get possession of the new premises, 54F automatically kicks in. But this sort of clause also restricts your assignability. Correct. Which means that your tenancy will continue, but theoretically suppose the building is brought down and the pace of construction is very slow, you would like to let go of the right in regard to the new premises by way of assignment to somebody else. The builder is also willing to cooperate, but if this agreement is if this clause is there in your tenancy, you will not be entitled to do that. So therefore it cuts both ways. So you have to,
it is two-way sword. It is a two-way sword. It's a two-way sword.
I just wanted to point it out because you know, members may decide how.
Appreciate.
Yeah. And in fact, if I can add something here, Sathe sir, this is one point which I always share with my clients, that please remember that taxation is only 20 or 30%.
Right,
so
right.
Do not lose 100% for
yes.
the temptation to save that 20 or 30% and get into restrictive situations. So probably this is a good example to take of that kind of a scenario. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Sagar, we go to main write-up. You can close this. And
I was just wondering whether in such clause, can you add a clause whereby it says that unless both the parties agree to transfer it somewhere in between. So this clause goes on, but if both the parties, if we keep the open, if we keep the possibility open of treating that transfer at some other point of time, or allowing the transfer or assignment of the tenancy right sometimes before getting the possession, if both the parties agree.
Yes.
Whether that is possible.
Can there be a side letter also?
No,
whereby
sir, I don't think what Sagar says is fine. You can add such a clause, but that is technically not necessary. Remember, Sagar, that this is a every agreement is governed by the law of contract, and a contract between contracting parties who are ad idem can always change. So at a later point of time, parties can agree that, oh, I had entered into an agreement with this particular clause. Now both parties are agreeing that the right in regard to the new premises is assignable, or the tenancy, as the case may be. So I appreciate that you enter into that clause right now, but that when you do, in itself would create a doubt in the minds of an assessing officer as to whether there is any sham involved. In law, every contract is capable of a mutual change at a later point of time. Correct, na, Deepak?
yes, yes, yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay,
yes, yes.
okay.
Okay.
3B
Deepak, one small question I wanted to ask. Can I ask?
on this point or something else?
This is on the 50C, what you have mentioned on the leasehold rights.
Yes, yes, go ahead, go ahead.
Is there any confusion that if leasehold rights are for a longer duration, then in that case 50C is applicable or
No,
something
no,
of
no,
that
no,
type?
no, no.
Like more.
See, if the land is leasehold, no, you have to understand what is leasehold. So if land is leasehold and if you have constructed structure on it and you own that structure, and if you transfer leasehold land along with the structure, 50C will apply. But
Okay.
if the premises are themselves leasehold, entire premises, 50C will not apply.
So this distinction remains realistic.
Yes.
With
So
reference to the
land
land.
or building, land or building, if you own any one of those, it will be covered under 50C. Sagar, point, go to main presentation, please. In 3B2, I had mentioned that if in lieu of tenancy, a residential house is allotted, then exemption under section 54F can be claimed subject to the compliance with certain condition that the assessee does not own more than one residential house on the date on which the tenancy is transferred. So there is one Madras High Court judgment. I don't think we should plan on that judgment, which says that if you own one house absolutely and another house jointly with somebody, then still also you will get 54F. But I don't think that's a very sound decision you can do tax planning on. If in lieu of tenancy, if you get either a commercial premises or non-residential premises are allotted, then you will not be eligible for any exemption either under section 54F or under 54EC, because 54EC has been amended to state that the investment in bonds can be made only against sale of land or building. Point number C of that says, this was the point we discussed and debated. When you have a tenancy, after the permanent alternate accommodation is allotted, and after that accommodation is allotted and you sell that ownership flat. So there are 2 points. One point is whether this will be a short term, what should be the period of holding, and number 2, what should be the cost of acquisition of that ownership flat. Sagar, can you go to annexure 3C1, both annexures? I have added this second annexure yesterday. 3C1 first. So this decision we had discussed at length, and it was held in this decision that, so in this case, what had happened was the tenancy got converted into ownership flat in say 1982, and this was sold much after that time. So this decision says that you have to take the market value of the ownership property as on 1982 as a cost of acquisition. And here the assessee said that they gave a comparative instances that in the year 1982, builder sold his other flats for certain price, and that was allowed to be taken as cost of acquisition. So cost of acquisition of that ownership flat is not nil, but it is the market value of the flat which you got in the year and the market value in the year of possession. Now go to the next decision. It's a Bombay High Court decision in case of a Dr. D.A. Irani. 3C1, second one. So here what had happened was the tenancy got converted into ownership, and within 4 months the ownership flat was sold. There the Bombay High Court is very clear. It says that it will be a short-term gain. That time some arguments were made that the lower right got converted into bigger right, and that bigger right has been sold. So you have to consider the date of acquisition of tenancy, but that was negated by the High Court, and the decision is against the SSC. Therefore, the date of acquisition will be the date on which you got the ownership flat, and the cost will be the market value of the flat. So we had covered up to this. Now I come to point number 4. Now this will be open for discussion now onwards. Point number 4. So in this case, there was a tenanted property, and there were two sons. One son was staying with the father, and the other son was not staying with the father. And there were a lot of disputes in the family. And after settlement of disputes, the family of the son who was not staying was given certain money. So the question is whether this section which says the tenancy right is being transferred will apply, and whether the capital gain will be chargeable. So in this decision, it was held, they have made a very distinction between what do you mean by lease and license, and they have taken a stand that possessory right is not same as tenancy right, and if you transfer possessory right, it will not attract tax at all. So the same principle which was held in case of goodwill, that is where the computation section fails, charging section fails. So they have relied upon certain decisions. So one is decision of Supreme Court in R.N. Kapoor. So they have distinguished between what do you mean by license and what do you mean by lease. So license is right to use property in a particular way or under certain terms and conditions. In case of a license, the legal possession always remains with the owner. However, in case of a lease, the legal possession is with the tenant. This is the main distinction between license and lease. Then the tribunal has relied upon decision in Star Chemicals Bombay High Court, where it was held that if you are in adverse possession, that is not a legal possession, say illegal possession, and you get certain money, it will not be liable for capital gain tax. Then there is another decision relied upon is in case of Sonal Zaveri. So in that case, the assessee was a director of a company, and she was occupying those premises in her capacity as a director, and she was not a tenant. And there were disputes in the family, and in the family disputes, the assessee was paid certain money for those possessory rights. So here also it was held that the capital gain cannot be charged. So effectively, the meaning of this decision is that if you are not a tenant, that means if you are not liable to pay rent, then you are not a tenant, and this section 55(2)(a)(1) does not apply to you. And since the computation section fails, charging section fails. Last time Anil had really warned, and I appreciate that, if the cost is capable of being ascertained, then this may not come to your rescue. I have added this new decision, Sambhaji Nagar Cooperative Society. I had just referred it last time. So Sagar, can you go to this 4.1? Sambhaji Nagar, Bombay High Court. This is the one which I referred just now, that the tenant who was not staying with the father and was paid certain money, and it is not taxable based on various judgments which I said. Just go to the next decision, Sambhaji Nagar. Here it's a very interesting decision of Bombay High Court. There the due to development control regulation, the FSI was increased from certain say 1.25 to 1.5. So 0.25 increase. And when the society or anybody gets money for loading that extra FSI of 0.25, since it does not involve cost of acquisition, it was held that the amount received against the sale of increased FSI or permission to load increased FSI is not taxable. The department had sought to argue on the basis of bonus shares, but it was held in that case that after bonus shares are held, the value of the original share goes down. Whereas when by operation of law, if you get extra FSI, the cost of the original FSI does not go down. So therefore, they have distinguished this angle from bonus shares. Anybody has any points on this? Point number 4 is over. So anybody has to say anything on point number 4? If nobody has any point, let's go to point number 5.
Deepak, only one small issue.
Yes.
Is that when you are saying that the possessory right,
yes,
when it is given up, it is not taxable as capital gain. What is the principle in that? I think is something which one needs to elucidate on, because inherently a capital gain will come into being when there is a capacity to transfer. So a capital gain will arise when a asset inherently is a right in rem. What happens in a possessory right is that it is actually not a right. It's personal to me. So I'm in possession and I give up possession. That is not actually the concept of transfer. So that is why, because why I'm pointing this out is that people should not plan on saying that a possessory right will always result in non-taxability. One has to be careful, because if that possessory, that continuous possession converts itself into a right which is capable of being transferred, then it will be a capital asset. But mere possession simpliciter without there being any right in itself will not make it a capital asset. And if it is not as a capital asset, a corollary to that is it is not chargeable to tax. That I think should be the distinguishing factor, I think.
Correct.
So
now elaborating this still further, suppose there is a family staying in any house. Suppose there are 4 family members and the rent receipt is in the name of husband, and there is wife and 2 children. And at the time of selling, if the money is taken in the name of all the 4, can I take stand in case of other than husband in whose name the rent receipt is there, that these 3 are not tenants because no rent is payable by them. So they are not tenants under section 7 subsection 15. So therefore they have only right to occupy, for which there is no cost of acquisition, and then
not advisable, because if you keep doing this, I have always said bad facts make bad law. So you try to do this continuously. Either you have an amendment or some courts hold otherwise. Because there is it's like this, that if your cohabitation with your the original tenant is as a result of a family relationship, then I find it difficult, and then it is on that account that you are getting a consideration for letting go of possession. I don't think you will succeed always in.
No, but it's interesting to
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree. I agree. Okay. Okay, go further. You have a lot to travel.
Point number 5. Sagar, point number 5.
No.
This is a very interesting decision. This is a very, very interesting point. Anil, I think we discussed this, and you had certain points about this. So what happens is, we are talking about tax treatment in the hands of a person inheriting tenancy on the death of father. So suppose there is a father. Either while he is alive, he tells a landlord to transfer tenancy in the name of his son, or after his death, the tenancy is transferred in the name of his son. Then the son has not paid any cost of acquisition. Then how do I compute capital gain tax, and whether the cost of acquisition would be nil? See, this is a very interesting decision. Everybody needs to look at section 55 very closely. Sagar, can you open that decision 5.1? Sagar, this is a tribunal decision. Go to the High Court decision. Yeah. So this is a decision of a Bombay High Court, is as late as 2018. Please go down. Please go down. I will read that relevant section because it is very interesting to read all the sections together, which High Court has done. Go up. Up. We don't read many times section 55 very closely, but here once you read this section, yeah, up 49. So now let's read 55.2. Okay, so 55.2a, when you talk about tenancy, so 55.2a, so in relation to capital asset being goodwill of a business or trademark or so and so, or right to carry on business or tenancy, right, stage carrier permits or loom hours, it says 1, in case of acquisition of such asset by the SSC by purchase from a previous owner, means the amount of purchase price paid. In any other case, please read the bracket, not being case falling under subclauses 1 and 2 subclause 4 of subsection 49.1. Now, that means if your case falls, you have inherited a tenancy, your case falls under 49.1.1. So if it falls under that, this 55.2a1 does not apply to you. This is what the Bombay High Court is saying. Now, you go to 49.1, it is mentioned up. It's there above. So by A is by succession, inheritance, or devolution. So if your case falls under this, 55.2a1 does not apply. Go to 55.2a, 55.2, yeah, 55.2b. There is a B. So B talks about in relation to any other capital asset. So therefore, tenancy right, since it is covered under 55.2a, this section will not apply. Now, therefore, 55.2a does not apply, 2b does not apply. Now, if you read 2b, the right to substitute value, market value as on either 81 or 2001 is in 2b. It is not in 2a, it is not in any other section. Now go to 55.3. Now this section 55.3 says where the cost for which the previous owner acquired the property cannot be ascertained. The cost of acquisition to the previous owner means the fair market value on the date on which the capital asset became the property of the previous owner. So this decision is saying that fair market value of the asset in the hands of the previous owner, you have to substitute. But even if it is acquired before 2001 or after 2001, it is irrelevant. I cannot substitute. Even if it was acquired by my father prior to 2001, I cannot substitute 2001 value because I am not covered under 55(2)(b). So you will get a long-term capital gain. You will get cost of acquisition will not be nil. It will be cost to the previous owner, and it will be a long-term capital gain. This is what Bombay High Court is saying. I have attached the decision of ITAT, but this was more relevant. So I thought we should talk about these 55(2)(a), 55(2)(b), and 55(3). So our concept should be clear. 55(2)(a) will apply only in relation to those specified assets. If they are acquired by yourself, if you have inherited, then you go to section 55(3). And in 55(2)(a)(1) and in 55(3), you don't get right to substitute value as on 2001. Any question? Because I think in our group discussion, many people had mentioned why this, why that, why, and why the substitution of value is not available. So interpretation of 55(2)(a), 2b, and 55(3) is relevant here.
Sir, I have a small comment to make.
Yes.
Permit me.
Yes.
See, the point is that you can do that substitution of the fair market value only if the cost of acquisition to the previous owner, that is the father in this case, is not ascertainable. So if the father has acquired it at a certain cost, then even that fair market value substitution is not available.
Yes, yes, yes.
So you will have to only directly take that cost and nothing beyond that.
1 minute. No.
No, because if you read 3, what does it say? Where the cost
let's
for
see.
which the previous owner acquired the property cannot be ascertained.
Yes, yes.
So if that cost can be ascertained, then you will have to take that cost and not the fair market.
Fair enough.
That was the only point I wanted to make.
Fair enough, fair enough, fair enough.
So it is not a substitution of fair market value, but the cost if ascertainable or the fair market value.
But if you look at
but not 1/4/2001, that is true.
Yes, but only thing is, in many cases, you know, these tenancy rights are handed over from father to son, and most of them, if you look at all the old tenanted properties in Mumbai, I don't think anybody has paid for it. Very few, because the pagadi was legalized very recently.
No, most of them are statutory tenants or successors of statutory tenants.
Correct. So there you will be able to substitute fair market value, and determining fair market value, maybe you can take a freehold value and certain percentage, 70% of that or something like that you can take.
Yes, that is acceptable. I mean, that has been accepted in many cases.
Correct. Correct.
So, Deepak, what you are now saying is that the amendment of treating tenancy rights as nil came to the fore from 1995. Now, if the original tenant, that is the father, has not paid any cost at all, then is his cost not nil?
No. There you will say it is fair market value. It can be determined. Na? Price can be determined. Market value can be determined.
So
here in this case, the tribunal had set it aside to the AO to substitute fair market value, but they said you will not get benefit of indexation. So and the SSC approached court for allowing for the benefit of substitution of value, so which court rejected. But they said, yes, whatever tribunal has held that you can substitute fair market value is fine.
Sathe sir, I have another take here.
No, I have a different view on this. Probably in this Bombay High Court judgment, I don't recall because entire decision is I'll have to go through. The point is, Deepak, at one point of time we say that tenancy is not inheritable. Now, if it is not so, when by virtue of a protection granted by a statute which primarily governs tenancy, protection of an occupant. So if you are occupying premises along with the original tenant, then you can become a tenant. In that scenario, to say that I am a successor
Hmm.
or a heir on account of which the tenancy is transferred to me, I don't know whether the counsel for the revenue argued the principle that if you look to how one tenant comes to be substituted by the other, there is no question of inheritance or succession. What happens is by the mandate of the Rent Act. And if that be so, then tenant X is tenant X, tenant Y is tenant Y. It is not, in my humble opinion, a case of succession as is classically understood. So therefore, I don't fully subscribe to this theory. The second part of it is that if in the hands of the original tenant,
The
if
succession
cost,
is wider than inheritance,
no,
Anil.
no, I appreciate, but is
So
tenancy
succession means in
does
case of a company,
does
it's a
tenancy,
partnership.
no, does tenancy devolve? Does it devolve by succession? Does it? The question is, so all other property, Deepak, if my father owned X, I get it on account of the operation of the Hindu Succession Act, on the fact that I am a successor of my father. He may not leave a will, so it is not intestate succession. Therefore, when tenant Y substitutes tenant X, is it succession as is understood under laws of succession, or a protection of the Rent Act that a relative residing along with the original tenant should be substituted for the original tenant? That, to my mind, is a case distinct from succession. So
Tell me,
I,
when a partnership firm is succeeded by a company, we always say, na, the company
so,
succeed,
so, so, so,
so it is success. So there is a succession. So
therefore,
succession is again a very
I
arguable case.
I agree,
Hmm.
but there the situation is that you are carrying on. So ultimately, by virtue of what position, whether the position is of the succession statute or of the statute of rent control, that's the point, and that is precisely why you pointed out the provision in the Rent Act that if there is a business being carried on at a premises, then it is not the heir of the person who dies, but his partner who will become a tenant. Why? The principle is that the protection should ensue to a person who is occupying. So, to my mind, to argue blandly that succession, and therefore as a corollary you will get the operation of 49, 49, 55, everything read together, to my mind is not the only manner to argue this. Of course, as I said, when we want to argue in favor of an SSC, we will argue this. On that there is no quarrel, but the point is I am just sounding a note of caution is
Agree.
I'm just pointing
But
out the
I can
distinction.
always say that I'm succeeding that person in business.
You
So there is a
can
succession. Yeah.
again. So therefore, the question is that succession, he will become a tenant on account of the Rent Act.
Yes.
Remember, this is a
Yes.
so therefore that succession is distinct from succession as a legal heir. Is what so,
But 49(1), when it talks about succession, it doesn't necessarily mean succession.
so that will have to be argued separately. Go
Yeah.
further. I just wanted to highlight the
Good,
point.
good, 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 good.
Okay, okay.
Point number 6.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, anybody has anything to say about point number 5? So now we come to tax treatment in the hands of landlord. many times what happens, there is a tenant, and the tenant changes, and there is an agreement between the incoming tenant and outgoing tenant and the landlord, and landlord receives certain money for giving consent to transfer of the tenancy. So this decision 6.1, annexure 6.1, it says that the amount received for giving consent to transfer the tenancy is to be taxed as income from other source. Do you want to go into the decision, or we will go to point number 2? So I have thought about another option, that if the landlord pays outgoing tenant certain X amount and keeps that property vacant, and after 3 years inducts new tenant and collects Y amount, whether that will amount to capital gain. So in this case, let's go to and third contingency is, many times landlords say you pay me 100 months rent and you will become the owner. So in last two cases, there is possibility to argue that it is a capital gain. In first case, it is income from other sources. So let's go to annexure 6.1 and then go to annexure 6.2. So there are two decisions which I have attached. So here, this is a decision in Chapriya case. Their last para, I think. Here they have gone into lot of details. They have analyzed various provisions, and then they have said that they have considered different sections also, and they have said, therefore, we can read this last. Further, it is pertinent to note that there is no time gap between the vacation of the property by the old tenant and grant of rental rights to the new tenant. There is thus the continuity of renting of the property, and there is no evidence to infer that the house is in vacant possession of the SSC even after the alleged end of the tenancy of the outgoing tenant. And therefore, it can be stated that the SSC has never got the property in vacant condition. Therefore, it cannot be stated that the house is entirely free from any tenancy vis-a-vis the outgoing tenant, but for the commitment in the said tripartite agreement. And of course, there is no claim of tenancy rights vis-a-vis the new tenant. Therefore, the amount received as a consideration for consent does not involve any transfer of capital rights attached to the property, and therefore it is a windfall gain and it is income from other sources. Now let's go to the next decision. See here, the person owned certain land and he granted mining rights to somebody, and in lieu of that he got certain consideration. So there the Supreme Court has held, so SSC purchasing land, granting mining rights for 10 years period for a lease premium of 5 lakhs in addition to the royalty. So they said that 5 lakhs is liable for capital gain. So if you apply analogy this to the situation which I have envisaged, that the landlord pays certain amount to the outgoing tenant, keeps that place vacant, and at a later date collects extra money, whether that will attract capital gain. Similarly, if the landlord charges tenant for converting his tenancy into ownership right, I think it should attract capital gain.
Yeah, so, I agree with that last proposition, that conversion of tenancy into ownership for charge of say 100 months rent or 120 months rent, that would mean that yes, you are transferring a capital asset of ownership, which the landlord has, is being transferred to the tenant. But as far as the second proposition is concerned, it's a debatable point. The reason is that
so here,
what happens, no, that 3-year difference which you were talking of.
Yes.
I mean, that difference may not really be material, because what is material is what is happening in the transaction. See, there is a tenant who surrenders his tenancy to the landlord,
Correct.
and in lieu of the surrender, he is paid certain amount.
Correct.
As far as the landlord is concerned, he has vacated or improved the value of his asset. So it's an improvement to the asset. So it will add to the cost of his entire property. Now, it is not a purchase or a price of a tenancy, because see, the here that decision which you were referring to earlier of the right merging into a greater right arises actually. What happens is, here is a property which is a subject matter of tenancy, and therefore it is not completely in the possession of the landlord, and therefore when he obtains the surrender of tenancy from a tenant, his title is improved, so therefore it increases his cost. But when he provides a tenancy to somebody, a new tenant, after 3 months, I sorry, 3 years, or whenever, even after 1 year, what he's charging is a salami or a premium. It cannot be a capital gain. It is
Why?
an amount which he
Why?
charges. Yes, because that salami or
But
premium
sir,
is actually
is a capital
taxable as
gain.
income from other sources. It is not a capital
No,
gain, because he is not.
no.
See, let me explain. A
Yes.
tenancy in a residential property is not something which can be carved out as a capital asset and given to a tenant. The tenancy arises because of him being a monthly tenant. That is, he pays rent from month to month, therefore a contractual arrangement, really speaking. So I'm saying this is a view which can be taken, and therefore
Okay.
saying that acquiring a tenancy right from an existing tenant and then selling it to another tenant, it's a ground which one has to tread with great caution, because decision can go either way depending on various
Yeah.
factors.
We are
That's the word of
discussing it.
caution actually.
Yeah, but if you look at that decision, I had an absolute right, and I gave only the mining right. The land still belonged to me.
Yes, but there is a
Right? So
difference there. The
yeah,
difference is because there is also an extractable asset associated with the land, namely the clay. So that clay can actually be extracted and consumed. So
but many
it's
times if
not
you
just the land. In fact, I mean, I may venture to say that if that mining keeps on happening, eventually the land may disappear, because there would be no land left. It would just become a big hole, which will of course have to be filled up. You cannot leave it that way because of the current laws, but the valuable part of the land will have gone away. So what will remain may not be worth that much.
So what I was saying is, when in my first point I had mentioned that when you acquire asset, you acquire bundle of rights, and if you sell any bundle, any right out of those bundle of rights, that also again is an independent asset by
Agreed,
itself.
but sir, the small distinction which I want to make, I mean, is
Hmm.
that a tenancy is not something which can be sold. Tenancy is created. That is, you grant a tenancy, make a person a tenant, a monthly tenant. You're not transferring some right to him. That's the view. It's a contractual relationship, really
What
speaking.
what
So I
what
mean,
what Deepak wants to argue is this. He
hmm,
wants to say that the tenant was occupying premises, and therefore, till his occupation continued, I could not have permitted another person to enter. In order to enable me to for the other person to enter, I incurred a cost. Once I incurred that cost, and on grant of the second tenancy, I earned a particular premium. That premium, he wants to argue that it is a consideration for the so my original right, we or the improvement now gets extinguished on account of the fact that a new tenancy is created, and therefore he is urging that that salami is consideration, and the cost that he incurred anterior thereto should be allowed as a deduction. That is the argument that you are making, right?
I'm trying to take, yeah.
yes, true. But then whether it's capital gain or
No, no,
not still remains a
I'm,
moot
I,
question.
I'm,
It should still be
I
salami.
no, no, I agree with you that it's not an easy proposition to argue,
I
but ultimately Deepak is trying to make something out of nothing, so it's right, fine. Creative argument.
No, I
Uh,
think
Uh,
I'm
I
willing to argue
think
this.
Deepak.
no, no, I only wanted to sound
Yeah, yeah,
out. I
sure,
mean,
sure,
even
okay.
I would also argue the
No,
same
I
way,
think
but That's
I
the
think
whole.
Deepak is
I
trying
think
to
Deepak, yeah,
really
yeah,
speaking.
yeah, yeah.
I think Deepak is trying to tell that this is not really speaking a transfer inter se between the two tenants. It is a landlord who is doing it. That's what I think he's trying to find out.
Yes, yes.
Anyway, Deepak, you can
So that's a
say
basic
a
difference.
lot of trans.
Yes, yes. Point number 7. Anybody else has anything to say? I mean, everybody should see. Point number 7, Sagar. So we are now in the tax treatment in the hands of incoming tenant. The question is, I have sold my house, and if I acquire a tenancy right, can I claim exemption under section 54? No, you cannot claim, because 54 is from investment from house into another house, and tenancy right is not house. Annexure 7(1). See here, go to the bottom. They have analyzed all the provisions, including section 27(3)(b). They have analyzed 269 UAF, everything they have analyzed. And in, in the end, they say, no, there is a difference. They have analyzed this CBDT circular also. This 269 UAF also they have analyzed, because 269 UAF said that if you hold a leasehold right for more than 12 years, it's treated as a property for the purpose of acquisition proceedings. Yeah. So therefore, in nutshell, what it says is that if you sell your house and you acquire tenanted property, you will not get 54 exemption. That's very clear. And I agree with this reasoning also, because a lot of arguments have gone into, there are a lot of detailed arguments. Those who are interested can go through them, all of them, this decision. But you will not get 54 exemption. Now the next situation is that I acquire tenancy right, and the value of that tenancy, the market value and the consideration. Suppose the market value is say 10 lakhs, and I acquire it for 5 lakhs. Whether the difference of 5 lakhs can be taxed under section 56 to 10? In my opinion, no, because 56 to 10 refers to earlier section, and it should, the tenancy right does not form part of those specified assets. So one has to go through section 56. Is anybody interested, and should I read that 56? So 56, original section 56 to 10 was the earlier section, and prior to that was 56 to 7. So there they have covered only certain properties. So property in relation to that means immovable property, that is being land or building or both. It includes shares and securities, jewelry, archaeological collections, drawings, paintings, sculptures, art, any work of art, or bullion. So tenancy right does not form part of anything, any of this. And therefore, even if you acquire tenancy at a price which is lower than the stamp duty ready reckoner value, 56 to 10 will not apply to you. It's very interesting. So this doesn't even cover motor car. So if somebody gives you motor car by way of a gift, 56 to 10 does not apply to you. So 56 to 10 will apply only to those specified assets, and tenancy right is not part and parcel of that asset. Anyone else? Anything else on this? Anybody has to say anything?
No, this is fairly clear.
Yeah, this is fairly clear. Not a very debatable issue also. Point number 8. So in case of a subtenancy, so this was a very interesting case. Husband and wife were doctors. both of them were operating from one particular clinic. The original tenancy was in the name of wife, and wife created a subtenancy in favor of husband, to which landlord had consented. So there was not an issue. So when both of them transferred their tenancy rights, that is, wife transferred her tenancy right and husband transferred his subtenancy right, the question was whether this will be liable for tax. Yes, they say that tenancy will include subtenancy, and therefore husband is also a tenant, and therefore the amount will be liable for capital gain tax. So you cannot take that stand that you are not a tenant, and this is an occupancy right. Point number 9 is 54F exemption. 54F exemption says that assessee should not construct another house within a period of 3 years of sale of the capital asset. What do you mean by construct? Whether it means commencement of construction or completion of construction. This decision talks about Annexure 9 says completion of construction. So in short, what it means that you have transferred tenancy, you have acquired another house. Then what you do, you buy another land and you start constructing another house. If you don't complete the construction of house within a period of 3 years, still 54F will not be denied to you. You will be eligible for 54F because it says you should not construct another house, means you should not complete the construction of the house, not the commencement of construction of the house. This is a small distinction made in this decision, Annexure 9.
Yes, I mean, this insight which you have provided is great because that is also the view when you are investing. So normally prima facie, when you invest in, you have to invest within 3 years in construction of a house property, irrespective of what section. I mean, I'm not just here on 54F. When whether it's 54 or 54F, you are acquiring an asset. So when you acquire that asset, it's either by purchase, which is 2 years, or construction, which is 3 years. Then that construction is supposed to be completed. However,
no, there is
what I want to I'm just comparing it this way. That, forget about the second house being constructed. I'm not on that just now. If under 54F you first claim exemption by acquiring a residence, you transfer a tenancy, so you make a capital gain, and then you purchase a residential house, you have 2-year limit. If you construct a residential house, you have 3 years limit. Now, this particular investment envisages that the construction is completed here also. I mean,
no. So there are many decisions that because.
But there are no. I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. Originally, the department stand has been that the construction has to be completed. Now, in view of the difficulties faced by people in moving into constructed house property because of various delays, they don't get completed. So therefore, there are decisions to the contrary. So the point is that a similar view could get taken for this 54F also. That's what I want to just flag. You get my point?
Yeah.
That since now here construction need not be completed, if that kind of an interpretation is taken for the other one, then that could cause a problem.
In fact, Deepak,
I have never have to move in parallel. That's my view. The two have to move similarly.
Can you open that Annexure 9?
But one more issue I have is an observation, nothing else to say. I have never understood the rationality of the proviso, because the proviso has no restriction in the sense that I'm not claiming 54F again. I claimed 54F. I sold another asset and I invested in the residential house. Now, if I acquire another residential house by using totally different funds, I don't see the rationale of denying me the 54F which you granted earlier. I just don't understand the rationale.
Can I provide that rationale?
What is the rationale?
I mean, I'll explain. What happens is 54F is intended to be given only to those people who have no other option, no other source of funds to acquire a house property than by selling some of their valuable capital assets. So I need to sell my jewelry, I need to sell my shares because I need a house. If you independently are capable of acquiring a house within the next 3 years, then you should not get this 54. That's the logic. You follow?
I,
That's really
I,
that's actually the
no,
logic.
that
I mean,
that that
it's the
that may
convincing
be.
enough logic.
No, but you can have one house, huh? Uh,
Yes,
you
you
can
can
have
have
one.
one
You can
house.
have Vishnu. You can
No,
have one
for that we
house.
have that Pranab Mukherjee's budget speech.
Correct, correct,
Actually, I
correct,
should
correct.
ferret it out because he has mentioned there that many
Yeah.
people already have a tenanted house. He has also gone ahead and said that. So they should not be denied this exemption. So I want to provide for one more house. But
All,
what he meant was that in a small, I mean, in an urban setting, there could be smaller houses, and so therefore one house may not be enough. All that has been discussed in that budget speech. But
I
he also goes to say that some people have a tenanted house and they should not be denied. So which was a big surprise because a tenanted house is not really a owned house.
Yeah.
So that was.
I don't really subscribe to this because
Yeah.
you go if that is the
Which
proposition, then if suppose I have 5 houses, now the law permits me, if I have five houses, I can go on acquiring 5 houses. If one has such a socialistic tenor, then in regard to the second or third house, you should tax me. Why you should permit me an exemption? If socialism is the principle, saying that look, okay, you already have a house, आपने ज्वेलरी बेचा, शेयर बेचा, तो मैंने एक एग्जेम्पशन दिया, दूसरा खरीदा तो मैं नहीं दूंगा, तो 5 घर है मेरे पास, तो 5 क्यों लेने दूं? I should be denied exemption in regard to the third or fourth of this. I don't think it's rational at all, in the sense that the way the law is otherwise.
See, you have that limit of 2 crores for getting the
No, no, no,
benefit.
no, no,
So
no,
Abhi,
no. That
just now
is
the other one which has
no,
come.
no, no, no.
That again is on something similar
Krishna,
thought process. Yeah.
I'm not on that. I'm not on that. That is when you sell one and buy two. But
Correct.
if I have 5 houses, if
You
by
allow
going by what Vishnu says, that all right, the principle is that all right, मेरे पास घर नहीं है तो मैं बाकी कुछ बेचूंगा, तो you permit me one. But if I buy another, then no. I am not permitted. Now I have 5 houses. I am rich, mega rich. So then in that scenario, the socialistic tenor should say 5 घर अगर है तो 2 घर के लिए आपको 54 मिलेगा या 1 घर के लिए मिलेगा, 4 घर आपने बेचे तो मैं exemption क्यों दूं आपको by investing in the residential house? 54 is permitted ना. अगर today I have a building,
No, I agree. Maybe you are enlightening them. So next time we'll have that.
No, it according to me is, I say, because
Anil, it could be the intention could be I own 5 houses. I want to retain one. I want to sell 4 and acquire another house. So
another house is
only one house.
I always classically argue that if there is a tenanted building which has got 5 or 10 residential units, right?
Yes,
now
yes.
the landlord is the owner of 10 residential
So you
units.
can buy 10 houses.
Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, chalo.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Point number 10, depreciation. Leasehold land and building. So leasehold premium is not an asset which is eligible for depreciation under section 32. However, suppose you buy a property in say MIDC or GIDC. Originally, there was a special bench decision in Mukund Iron and Steel, and the Bombay Tribunal said that amount paid for acquiring these leasehold rights is a capital expenditure not eligible for deduction. However, subsequently, go to annexure number 10.1. So 10.1 says that depreciation is not allowed because the tenancy right is not an asset specified under section 32. So this is the decision which says that you will not get depreciation. And 10.2 says, I had an occasion to argue this, on the basis of this. I had one company in Thane, Waghale Estate, and they acquired property from purchase, and there was unexpired period of lease of some 66 years out of 99 years. So we said that the leasehold premium which we paid, we will amortize it over period of the unexpired period of lease. So divide that premium by unexpired number of years and we claim deduction. And this, by following this decision, they said that this decision will overrule Mukonand and Still, and the SLP against this was also rejected by Supreme Court. So this decision has become final now. So what it says is that when you are paying leasehold premium, effectively you are paying a monthly rent of ₹1 or 40 rupees here per month. So this represents advance rent, and therefore you can claim it as a deduction proportionately. So you will get it as a deduction under section 37(1), but not under section 32. I think this covers all my presentation.
In this case, this is more or less like a deferred revenue expenditure.
There is no concept of deferred revenue expenditure under.
I understand.
But there are very few decisions like premium on the redemption of debenture is allowed to be amortized over a period of those debentures.
Correct.
So this is one such decision.
Correct. That's what it is akin to that. That's
Yeah. Strictly doesn't pertain to tenancy right, but I thought it pertains to business income and lease rent. So similar to tenancy right, therefore I just covered it. Anybody has any issue to be addressed or any questions or anything?
There was one person in the group who said that on extinguishment of tenancy and conversion to a PA, no, there is no capital gain. Na? There was some
Yes.
I have not.
There was Mr. Siddharth who had said that he had won
Yeah.
it in the CIT appeals, and
Ah.
in that CIT appeals there was no further appeal.
Ah.
But then I asked him to share that, but he has not shared anything. So I don't know if he's there in the group now as of now.
Okay. Okay.
I say
No,
actually
because it was a very interesting and novel
I would like to hear that part of the story.
We
but
would
then
like
he's
to
not
hear,
there.
what kind of arguments have gone into that.
Yeah,
And we would like to,
Right, sir. But I don't think he's there on the group now.
Since he's already succeeded, he doesn't want to join.
Maybe. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if others other than the 4 persons who have been actually deliberating for all of us, if there are any others who want to ask some questions,
and we expect participation from them.
सर उसमें क्या हो रहा है ना कि आपका लेवल और बाकी सबका लेवल थोड़ा गैप है, तो इसके लिए थोड़े डर रहे लोग.
नहीं, I think there should not be, they should come out and whatever is their query. See, we if I don't understand, I always ask, I don't understand. There is nothing wrong in it. It's not necessary that I should understand everything.
True, all of us are students actually. So
all of us are students, yes. Correct, absolutely.
I think next time we will not speak. Because ultimately the whole objective is that we should all grow together. There's no point in our going. Because
sir, any view on Mr. Siddharth's line of argument?
What is the line of argument? We have not understood that.
He has not shared that, except saying that tenancy rights should be taken as on 1st April of 2001. The value, whatever be the mode of acquisition of the tenancy. I don't know how he's argued that, but that's his line of argument.
But I just now showed 55(2)(a)(1) and 55(2)(b) and 55(3) that 2001 is available only in 55(2)(b), and tenancy right is not covered in 55(2)(b) at all. The starting itself is any asset other than tenancy right.
Other than tenancy right, sir. That's why. But how you won that argument is something which I would like to.
Yeah, but Vishnu, he says that there is no transfer at all. So
yes, further he says there is no transfer. Yes.
Which is something which it's not in consonance with what our thinking is. So
and then he says that the tenancy, he says even if the building is demolished, your tenancy right remains. I said, boss, tenancy rights is because of the premises. If the premises and the building is gone, you don't have any tenancy rights.
So that is why it will be interesting to see what is the exact nature of argument.
Right.
Anyway,
sure. Yes, good.
Thank you, sir.
So Pramod,
he can share that judgment with us. Whatever
Which one?
he has argued.
Which one?
What you are referring to, that
Yeah, no, that has not been shared. That's the whole point.
No, that's what you can ask somebody.
So yes, if possible, I might talk to him on personal level and see whether he is ready to share that line of argument and judgment.
Yeah.
It may be for benefit of all.
Let him not disclose the
Name.
name and
Correct.
figures.
Correct, correct. So
Hiding certain important aspects.
no, sometimes you argue, and at that point of time, that is accepted, but that does not necessarily mean that the argument was right, no? Unless it is argued further or certain other angle is covered, not covered. All those aspects are always there.
Sagar, I long time back I read a book by Justice Chagala, Roses in December, and he has made a very good statement. I just quote him. I mean what he has said. He says that decisions of Supreme Court are final not because they are infallible, but because there has to be finality to the proceedings. If there was any court above Supreme Court, probably 30% of the decisions of the Supreme Court would be reversed.
That's a very good sentence and thought.
Yeah.
That's true also.
That's true.
Since that we have discussed this all, before we close, I would suggest that we are into the capital gain. So I had suggested that if there are any other aspects related to capital gain, if somebody is able to lead the discussion, so what may happen is that if there is a continuity. Now we have just covered only the tenancy aspect. If there are some other critical aspects related to capital gain, because every now and then we come across purchase of property, sale of property, capital gains, and then 3 years purchase. So when exactly the transfer should be, these are very, very important points, and we always get confused on those as to, when exactly the transfer has taken place, like whether it is a date of agreement, date of payment, date of possession, substantial payments, because, you may sometimes argue whichever is suitable to you, but what are the final judgment? What is the settled law? If somebody is able to talk on that, then we'll be confident in, taking up the cases or arguing the cases.
But Sagar, this will require 4 or 5 sessions, not just 1 or 2. So you'll have to start with first transfer, then go to short term, long term. So that all itself is a long capital asset.
Correct. So one may actually start.
Then 54F, 54EC.
No, even if we are able to, crystallize on at what point of time the transfer takes place, then its implementation into the various other sections can always be thought about, no? So, I mean.
No, but that has also a lot of other angles, like whether when you sell depreciable asset, whether you can claim 54EC or 54F.
There's a lot of angles.
There are a lot of angles.
Point of compensation also, when compensation is paid for to occupant.
This is
of residential property which is sold. There are many aspects there.
No, but I think yes, if you say that only in respect of transfer you want to have, then there can be one session only on transfer, 247.
Yeah. So we can actually break this vast subject into some small aspects, and then we can continue. In any case, we need good topics to discuss and good leaders to lead the discussion. So this is just a suggestion. Of course, we have some time.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
So Pramod, if you are there, I had suggested that if you could close this meeting with
sir, Sagar sir, just one question before we wind up. Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Actually, I have one question now. If the original tenant is alive, okay, and he just suggests that it needs to be transferred, the rental receipt needs to be transferred to his son's name. Okay, so is that possible, and does it involve any transfer in this case arising capital gain?
No, if there is no consideration involved in this, then there is no question of nothing, na?
But even if the original tenant is alive and still he suggests that the receipt needs to be transferred in his son's name, so can that happen?
Yes.
Just because the son is living with him.
Yes, it can happen. And the first of all, then there won't be any capital gain in his hands. and
Yeah.
there won't be any 56, which we have seen both angles we have seen in this.
So can I extend this query a bit more?
Yes.
Suppose the sun then goes then the premises goes for redevelopment. Then when the sun gets the new premises, will it be eligible for 54F because it's a very short term? His right is a short term right.
No, then in that event, I would certainly recommend to add that clause so that those two clauses which Milind Desai had recommended. So if
Right,
you
sir.
do that, then you will be able to postpone it to 3 years.
3 years, right? Okay, okay. Then those two clauses can be added and saved there. Right, right.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, friends.
Yeah, please try to close that.
I am extremely thankful on behalf of the group to Deepak, Anil, especially Anil started with the discussion very well that day, and Deepak has concluded it. You know, the role of the opening batsman is always difficult, but Deepak and Anil both have played a wonderful role, and we will always seek their assistance, help whenever we require in future. With all this, I am once again thankful to both of them and even Vishnu. In addition, Sagar basically has muted this idea and therefore Sagar also. So thank you very much. And we really carry it with big applause to everybody. Yeah.